it's kind of this idea of I want you, but I don't need you. And I think if you can carry that idea throughout your life towards your goals and things that you want that seem to be outside of you, that idea of I really want this, but if I'd never get it, just wanting it was enough. Wanting it was the thing that drove me to take the actions that ultimately made me into the person that I am. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of ShiShi Meditations. And today I want to talk about desires, goal setting, and how having a healthy relationship with our goals and our desires is so important in maintaining a general state of peace and happiness. Um, so what's inspired me to talk about this topic is I actually last weekend I was in LA and I did a 2-day tantric workshop where basically it's like they're teaching you the basics of tantric sexuality. So, for people who maybe aren't as familiar with that world, essentially the fundamental concept is that is about redefining your relationship with pleasure, physical pleasure in your body, sexual pleasure, and specifically about redefining, the idea of what an orgasm is. So for most people, it's an orgasm is like this peak experience that you're leading up to it by doing all these other things, and eventually that's kind of like the reward at the end, right? And essentially what Tantra teaches you is to, rather than be super attached to that final reward at the end, which can cause you to be very unconscious in the way that you relate to your romantic partner or yourself, or their body or your body, to rather redefine your definition of orgasm as essentially just a free flow of energy in your body, and to start to appreciate and place more value and importance on the entire experience, on the entire process. From looking into a lover's eyes to just feeling your own breath move through your body and all the little nuanced pieces, and just really desensitize your body so that you're less attached to this final outcome and more invested and in the process, and you can squeeze more juice out of each moment. And obviously this workshop it's a tantric workshop, which is very much defined in the world of romance and sexuality. But coming out of this workshop, I had a lot of insights about myself and the way that I relate to myself and others. But I also kind of realized that this idea of not being attached to a final goal, but rather being attached to the process, the inherent process that you undergo in reaching that goal, is really applicable to all areas of life. And I think it's interesting because the moment that you decide that you want something that you don't have in the physical world, the moment you decide that, the moment that you have the thought, I am over here and there's something out there that I want to get, whether it's love, affection, a certain amount of wealth, a certain type of relationship, a certain type of lifestyle, a certain, fame, whatever it might be. The moment that you set that goal, that's a really pivotal and powerful moment, because I think it's important for us to set goals. The fact that we can consciously direct our lives in whatever way we choose is kind of what separates us from other animals in some senses. The fact that we can transcend above just our base desires to feed and replicate and, pass on our genes. So I don't think that having goals is a bad thing. But I think your relationship with your goals is really important and will determine how happy you are in the process of moving towards those goals. In Buddhism, there's a very common philosophy. It's really like the core tenet of Buddhism, and essentially they say that the only two sources of suffering are craving and aversion. So if you're ever suffering, if you're ever not happy in the present moment, it's either because something's happening that you don't want, so you want it to stop, aversion, or you are not satisfied with your life in some way or with the present moment and you want something that you don't have, craving. And essentially you can just boil down all forms of suffering into those two categories. And that's kind of a core tenet of Buddhism. And, I think the latter of those two, craving, is essentially what having a goal is. Like the moment that you decide that you want something, that is a form of craving. Like you want something that you don't have. And I think this explains why, some people, Buddhists and not, decide to live a life of monkhood. They kind of just essentially just decide, hey, I'm just gonna, if the fastest path to peace and true fulfillment and happiness is to just eliminate cravings, then I'm just gonna not get married, not have sex, not eat, and just go like meditate on a mountaintop in the Himalayas. And I'm not going to try to judge those people for saying that they're doing the wrong thing or whatever, because I do think that, everybody has their own path. And if that's something that someone feels called to do for some period of time in their life or their entire life, who am I to judge that? But, at least from my perspective, as somebody who is living in the modern world, in America, in a westernized society that's very driven by achievement and consumerism, and it's a capitalist society in which there is a tremendous cultural zeitgeist and onus placed on achieving things. I am somebody who has very strong goals and has very strong ambition towards those goals, and I work hard towards them. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But like I said earlier, I think the key is how you relate to your goals. And this is kind of the point of this video, is to talk about, if you are moving towards a goal with a scarcity mentality, a mentality of lack, a mentality of, I won't allow myself to be happy, I won't allow myself to be at peace until this thing happens, until this goal comes true, until I get my perfect romantic partner or lover, or until I achieve this level of financial success or this level of fame or whatever, I feel this much love in my life. You're robbing yourself of the opportunity to feel happy and present, happy in the present moment, in the process of moving towards that goal. And the reason you're robbing yourself of that is because you're placing all of your happiness and your peace, and you're attaching it to this, future outcome, and essentially like investing your own happiness in the future and saying, no, that's in a brokerage account that I can't touch until I reach this goal. And, I think that way of going about things can be really draining and stressful. And I speak from personal experience. I mean, the reason I'm bringing this up is this is something I struggle with a lot. And this is why I do a lot of spiritual work and go to things like Tantra workshops. Like, obviously, yeah, it's cool to learn how to get better at sex, but like, the larger reason why I'm interested in this kind of stuff is to explore these different modalities and train my awareness in different ways. And I think what I've just realized is, when I look at my own goals, it is the grasping for those goals. It's the feeling of separation between me and my goals that creates the suffering. It's not even the fact that I don't have the goal. It's the fact that I feel like I need the goal to be happy. I need to achieve that thing in order to then finally like relax and take a deep breath and not be stressed out. And I've really noticed this in myself. It's that attachment to the idea that, oh, like if I don't get this thing, then somehow I'll be incomplete. And the crazy part about that is that at some point in your life, no matter what goal you have, no matter how strongly you want to achieve something, at some point in your life, you didn't feel that way about that thing, So all of your goals are essentially created by your past experiences and your expectations of yourself and your life based on, your skills and what you think you're good at and opportunities that you have and your resources and what you think you can create in this lifetime. But, at one point in your life, you were perfectly content with none of those goals. Maybe you have to go back years to when you were a child or whatever it is, but at one point you were totally fine. And I think that's a really important thing to remember, that all of our goals are constructs of the mind. So we shouldn't allow them to dictate our happiness. Our happiness should be agnostic to those goals. And I think a much healthier way to relate to your goals is, rather than saying, I'll be happy when this happens, to realize that the actual feeling of wanting something, the actual feeling of desiring something and working towards it and taking actions towards it, is the inherent reward in itself. That is the reward, the feeling of knowing that you're making progress and feeling that feeling of wow, I really want this more than anything. If you can learn to love that feeling and not treat it like a crippling like anxiety that isn't going to be eased until you get the thing, then I think you can really live your life in a much more peaceful, wholesome, and ultimately productive way, because you're not operating from the hormones of stress. And I'll just wrap this up with a quick example. With women, I find that my most satisfying interactions and relationships romantically are when I'm looking at a woman and I can see her and I can just look at her and say, wow, like you are just so beautiful in your own unique way, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And I can feel the desire that I have for her in my body, but I'm completely unattached to the outcome of whether or not that's reciprocated in some way, sexually, emotionally, whatever. Because just the fact that she's making me feel something is a reminder that I'm alive, that I'm a human being that has the capacity to feel so intensely. And that in and of itself is the reward. And it's kind of this idea of, I want you, but I don't need you. And I think if you can carry that idea throughout your life towards your goals and things that you want that seem to be outside of you, that idea of, I really want this, but if I'd never get it, just wanting it was enough. Wanting it was the thing that drove me to take the actions that ultimately made me into the person that I am.